Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Frictionless System Migration webinar. We're really excited to have you here today. My name is Anissa All, and I'm a product marketing manager here at Celonis. Also presenting today, we have Mickey Rizza, who is a program vice president of enterprise applications and digital commerce at IDC. At the end of the webinar, we're going to have a question and answer section. So if you have any questions during the presentation, please stick them in the chat function, and we will try to address them at the end. And with that, I'm going to kick it over to Mickey to get started.
Thanks, Anissa. Hopefully you guys can hear and see my screen as we get started here. So thanks everybody for joining us. We have quite a bit of information we'd like to share with you today and hope that we can make it a discussion with some questions from you near the end of the webinar. So thank you. So let's get on to frictionless system migration. And my slides don't want to go forward. There we go. So digital transformation. What I'd like you to think about is our world is becoming, as you all know, more and more digital with the apps, the way we use things, the way we do our banking, the way we look something up anymore, the conversations we have with our computers or our tablets or our phones. Everything is really changing. But part of this evolution as we change as consumers and the way we run our everyday lives is transferred into the business aspect. And more businesses are understanding their role and how their companies need to change as they go through this process. So you see here on the screen, we've got some examples of companies. And if I think of, a traditional wash machine and a dryer, right? You go to it, you turn the dials, you do whatever you need to, you put your clothes in, it washes them, you take them, you move them and put them into the dryer. Well, more and more that's a digital experience where you, instead of turning a dial, you click on a button and you have a more digital aspect of something that looks more like a tablet or a phone in front of you. And now it tells you how long do you want, what type of clothes it is. It gets more personal into the information that'll help do a better job washing, right? And the same thing from the drying experience. Do you just want to air fluffed and to take the wrinkles out, or do you want something that's going to completely dry your clothes and get you to that next level? Unfortunately, no one has figured out yet how to take the clothes out of the washer and put them in the dryer. But my point here is that things are changing. And so that means our interaction with devices or things that we utilize and the way we interact with something on a day-to-day basis is changing as well. And so as we go through some of this presentation, I'd like you to think about your everyday workflows, things that you do in the business world, compare them to the consumer world, and start thinking about how things are changing and how you might be changing too. So for businesses to make these change, you see someone like an Avery Dennison who really need to reinvent themselves to exploit their emerging technologies to get to a better business outcome. So think about the fact that, you just don't go buy labels anymore and label everything. You might do something electronically labeled. You might do something from a completely different experience, right? The same thing with Ford and Tesla and GM and all the other car manufacturers out there. You're getting more to a dashboard that's more tablet or phone oriented, right? You have more information coming at you that's more useful. And there's also things that are hidden away to the side so that it doesn't distract from your day-to-day driving experience. So while these are brought forward to give you a better consumer or customer experience as you utilize the digital aspects, it's also a way of life that's streamlining many of our workflows. And that's what we're going to spend a little bit of time on today. So what we find at IDC is digital transformation is definitely changing businesses. We've got it in a five area maturity model here. And if I think of those that are resisting, those are those that really don't understand that the world is changing and you must become more digital. You must streamline your work experience across the business as well as what you bring out to your customers and clients at the end of the business, right? Those that are exploring are putting a little bit of emphasis in it, maybe trying it from a customer aspect or changing a product around that's going out into the field, or even something as simple as changing the way they do their ERP and moving into the cloud and getting more cloud innovative instead of being an on-premise completely customized system and trying to figure out how you digitize a process from there, right? The players, those are the ones that are actually starting to get to that next level. They understand it. It's not just one-offs or two-offs. It's starting a strategy that's going to eventually come up through the business and work its way to something that's more of a digital transformer, a leader, one that cuts across the entire enterprise, takes it to the next step. And then finally, you have those disruptors, those that are rethinking, reimagining, and just changing the way They do business completely. And those disruptors are the ones that are going to be around for the long term. So part of the wisdom I want to bring to you today is the fact that as your business transforms, the better you're going to be. And we all don't know what the future holds here, but if we go into a recession or if we have an issue with our economy, those that are digital are going to be around a lot longer than those that I'll call them are analog or aren't into the cloud world, aren't using innovative solutions, aren't getting to the next step. So part of this webinar is not just thinking about getting to that frictionless changeover, it's also about thinking what it's going to do to enable your business to be better. One of the things that we find within IDC is that for digital and non-digital manufacturers, we've actually tracked the revenue growth and profitability that we're finding through organizations, and we call them digitally determined and digitally distraught. So those organizations that are not moving forward and those organizations that are moving forward from a determined aspect. We really see a difference in revenue growth and profitability from where they're going to because they're focused on the digital side. We also find the culture of digitally determined is much better. They are spending more time scaling. They're thinking about how do I scale quicker? How do I get to market faster? How do I make it more personalized and be able to bring these digital services at a very large, high rate of speed and effectiveness into the organizations we're selling to? We find the talent excellence is much better. Those organizations spend more time thinking about an innovative culture, looking at change management and collaboration. And they also prioritize customer excellence in the delivery of products and services. Think about that. Many companies out there talk about great customer sat, but they don't talk about that customer experience and what you actually walk away from. In most cases, when you hear about problems in the world, they're usually the problems. They're not all the greatness or things that are happening on and making that customer experience and excellence a better part of the end product here. So those that are digitally determined do much better. So I wanted to spend a little time thinking about why companies are digitally distraught. And in reality, this is going to show you how to be more digitally determined. So we start looking at digitally distraught companies I'm guess I'm going backwards here. Digitally distraught companies have outdated KPIs. So when we look at digitally determined KPIs, they spend more time on the innovation rate. How many more products can they bring to market? How many more standards types of products with then maybe nuances or customization features or something that's a little bit different on top of that product can they bring to market faster, sell it more, bring more revenue in, and keep that chain going, right? Customer advocacy scores, they're much better, right? They have a better customer experience, a positive outcome. They know how to take their own data, capitalize on it, monetize it, and get a better business return. Think about it. Each of you work for an organization where you have data sets or things that you bring forward internally or within your manufacturing or within your customer area, however you work your business. And there's pieces of that that no one else has or no one understands this knowledge pool that you have. We see many organizations out there that are digitally determined and on that digital disruptor stage who are reselling pieces of this data or this information so that you and your organizations can use it to do even better work. So they've actually come up with a whole different product mechanism here. And then they spend more time on digital operations, right? Creating sustainable digital processes inside their company and not just externally to what they sell the world, but inside the company. So if I think about a company like Kohler, right? They make bathroom fixtures and features and faucets and showers and toilets and whatnot. And they have changed their product so much, but they've done it also internally with their own business processes because they started to recognize they needed to make a shift. And when you start thinking about that in your Kohler, now I can go into a bathroom and I can say to the device sitting there, please turn on the water to my medium temperature so I may wash my hands and my face. Please turn on my shower the same way, or even flush the toilet, right? So if you start thinking about a digitally determined organization, they've not only changed the way their products go to market and what they're bringing to that experience, they're doing it internally to get themselves to that next level. So they're ready and more nimble, they can scale quicker, and they can get to that next level. Unfortunately, the digitally distraught or distressed spend a lot of times on traditional metrics. Please don't take this as, you can't look at profit and revenue. Those are definitely extremely important and those will never go away. But efficiency factors, productivity rates, they're more focused on the legacy measures that are inside a company. moving from one business process to the next. How much can I improve the productivity? How much better can it be? How do we change something in the process, take something out and make it faster? Instead of being focused on that, focus on the digital, because the digital is automatically going to change those productivity rates if you do it right. Another area that companies are focused on, those that are digitally distraught, is siloed digital transformation initiatives. So those that are digitally distraught really spend time on either having a special project or a small office of digital transformation where they've tried to establish some governance and do different things and help the company focus on just these digital things or give it a try and see if it's going to work. That's a digitally distraught organization, or one that hasn't even gotten that far, right? But those that recognize it and understand digital is here to stay, understand it's a pipeline, it's going to change their business from a product side back into the way they actually run their business, like someone like Lenovo. Think about it. They've embedded digital business across their organization. They see it as part of an organizational structure, right? It's not just one-offs. It's how do we work with our people? What kind of innovation do they have? Where do they get to go to the next step? What does this mean to the way the business actually is structured and runs itself, right? They understand it's an enterprise-wide aspect that they need to get to. Companies that are digitally determined also have a very focused strategy. Those that are distraught, they have a strategy, but they have a lot of tactical plans and roadmaps, right? They spend more time just perhaps on the line of business or doing a short-term study, similar to what I said earlier on the organizational structure. But in this case, that structure for the determined aspect is tied into an entire integrated strategy, tied to the whole business, that's embedded in the business and is actually measured across the business from a digital perspective. How much did we actually do from a digital perspective? Were there any manual workflows? Were there workarounds here? How do we change that? How do we look at different data sets? What if we pull different information pieces in and we can actually predict and make our business even better? What are the innovation pieces we need? How many cloud technology platforms do we have? How do they come together, right? So they start to understand that they have to have a full focus strategy that hits the entire enterprise. And those also means that the digitally distraught spend more time on the tactical plan. So they start looking at a single roadmap. So they might take, we don't really have anything digital here, but we've decided to come up with something in this area that we can use. So we're going to tie that together. And there might be some more areas we can look at. They slowly evolve, right? And that evolution sometimes takes them to a single roadmap that's tied to the overall strategy. In most cases, it takes them to multiple single roadmaps. Some get started, some are lost, some don't come together. So instead, what happens is you have one-offs going on, you never know how they come together, and you have pockets of digital that don't really get you to that next step. That's what the digitally distraught do. Those that are digitally determined tie it to one single strategy. They tie the entire roadmap to an enterprise-wide organizational strategy, again, and embed it in the business and get it to that next step. Those that are digitally distraught also have limited expertise in digital capabilities. So while they may not have cloud systems and they have more legacy on-premises customized systems, they may try a little bit of innovation here and there. They don't really have the expertise inside the organization to help them get to the next step. They don't have necessarily all the IT resources, the visions from the line of business. They don't have the entire perspective on where they need to go. Instead, they focus on people, process, and performance. And sometimes technology is tied into that. Digital is referring to digital technology, digitalizing the business, getting it to a more technology-focused businesses. So those that are distraught really focus in many cases on the wrong aspects, so they don't understand. To become determined, they have to lift and shift their ideas. And the last piece around those that are digitally distraught are they have silos of innovation. And I'll tell you, we spend a lot of time with companies who have done this. And it's not uncommon. You find an IT organization that cuts across an entire enterprise, and you see silos of innovation where procurement has gone ahead and gone to a SaaS-based system or HR or CRM, right? And most of those are what's out there right now. But the ERP systems, the piece that runs the operation that finance uses significantly and ties into manufacturing and or supply chain really has so many on-premises and legacy apps tied to it If you remove one, you have to put something else in place, and it's become nothing more than a bunch of band-aids to keep your business going. Those that are digitally determined have moved beyond the silos of innovation. They have a roadmap, and they understand they need to start removing these legacy products, move more to SaaS and cloud-based deployment models, as well as bringing in more innovation such as IoT and cognitive and AI and intelligent workflows and more data and analytics aspects, as well as tying into things like 3D printing and anything like AR and VR. So you really see these shifts going on, and the silos are slowly going away, but it's going to be another few years before companies really understand that, so they can understand that while the silos exist and they may have been useful, they're a thing of the past because it's not bringing the enterprise together from a digital perspective. So one of the things I want to impart you with is, while I'm talking about digitally distraught and digitally determined, it's really about also looking at a digital platform, understanding that you have an intelligent core in the center and that you've got data, and if you use it properly, it'll bring you insights tied to the people, tied to the assets that you have, any of the processes that connect from lead to order or procure to pay or design to product, whatever they may be. There might be APIs attached to it, even microservices, right? And then if I go over to the right side here and I'm looking to the external side, right? IoT and AR, VR and mobile and bots and other pieces that allow us to take more actions and get more information and bring it to that next step. So those key elements really align around API strategies, right, that take those data sets and help you understand what you have in your entire ecosystem. It's looking at an agile application architecture, right? It's something built on platform as a service that you can tie microservices, containers, and APIs to. It's understanding that all of this technology, as it comes together to run your business, is going to bring you new customer experience just in general, both inside the organizations as you work between line of businesses, to the external customers that you sell products to and that you work with, even backwards into that supply chain aspect and the way you work with your suppliers and what you do from a supply chain and manufacturing perspective. But at the middle of it is an intelligent core. The data sets, everything comes together so you can make and get to the next level where you need to go for your organization to be the most proficient, be able to scale, be able to work in a world that's hyper complex, hyperscale, and hyper speed. And if we think of that hyperness, we really need to start planning our technology solutions to get us to that next level. So as we've gone through this, one of the things, as you know, I cover is enterprise application. We spend a lot of time with organizations understanding their modernization aspect. Typically, companies go through and they do a review of all their assets, right? They have those that they're going to retire. I didn't put those on here, but that's one way to do it, right? They say, you know what? We've gotten our use out of this. It's very manual. We don't use them very much. Just get rid of them and retire them. Then we have those that we want to replace, right? We've had some good things with the system. We know there's better capabilities out there. We can get more functionality. So we're going to replace it and come up with the best solution. We also have those that we might rebuild by upgrading, enhancing, even migrating, from an old system to a new system, from, let's see, an R3 or an ECC into an S4, right, and taking it to the next level. To those that are going to retain. So you're going to keep your CRM system. It may be with a different provider than the rest of your technology stack, but it's superior to you. It brings a lot of business value, and that is going to be part of your DX platform as well. So you're simplifying that journey and you're moving it to a DX platform. So when I think about going to the DX platform, migration isn't really that easy, right? If I think about traditionally, especially with on-premises, we bring consultants in. It's a huge investment for organizations. I can't tell you the number of organizations that sit there and tell you and tell us, basically, look, we've spent millions on this over the years. We need to get beyond this, right? We just can't keep investing dollars in that. We need to get to the next step and we need to be digital. But how do we do it? We don't want to spend all this money, right? It takes a lot of time and effort. There's always some sort of smaller team that's been put together to select the next technologies and investment strategies, help build an entire corporate strategy around it. And then they work for a few years with the consultants, with everybody else to get to the next steps, right? And that includes process mapping. right? They take all the business processes, they look at where they fit, they look at how they come together, the systems they interact with, they try to make them more efficient and streamline them. And even that is subjective, right? Depending on their own nuances, their own strategies, or even their own perceptions of what the problems are in the business, right? So it's nothing that really gets down to that point that has a lot of information behind it and takes you to that next step, right? So, you get this never-ending problem of trying to migrate and get to the new systems, or even start from scratch and get to the new, but you're going to need the data somewhere, right? And so you're missing items, you're missing data, you've got scope creep because you forgot hundreds of things. And so the dollars, the time, the effort, it just keeps on going. And it's really people focused. So it's not easy, right? You see an energy manufacturer here talking about the fact that the lift and shift took them 18 months, right? A lot of errors, and they only had partial information. So was it really a complete lift and shift? No, probably wasn't. They're probably missing a lot. And when I think of a company like Tesla, who's got everything digital in the products that they sell, in order for them to move and get to the next level as fast as they can, they have to be beyond this migration, right? Any of the organizations, LG, Ford, right? Kohler, Hire, any of the companies out there, even those that I don't even know are on this webcast because I can't see the list, you start thinking about it. For you to get to that next step, you want to work that way internally, and you don't need a migration stopping you to get to the next level. So what we find are those that are digitally determined, and back to this digital platform aspect, they migrate faster and they do it with more accuracy. Why? Because they think about everything that we've just been talking about, that consumer version and the business version and becoming more digital. They recognize that they can use technologies and resources that can help them do it faster. They can use AI. They can look at automation. They can do a better job extracting the data, looking at the permutations that come forward and help them with the process mapping so it's not so subjective, it really becomes objective, right? They move from that as is to a future state on a continuum. It's not just we're going to be there one day and this is what it is now, but we'll be there, right? They've created the entire line to get them there, the entire roadmap, right? They can see exactly what they're going to be doing. As it says here, they're creating digital footprints. It allows you to move from one to the other, see what's going on, do some audits, do some compliance, get the complete governance aspect, and most importantly, it brings the full business value. This is an S4HANA partner who came forward and said they can automate processes, migrate from one platform to another, and be more successful in the organization. Complete, timely, and information transfer to the next step. So when you think about this, think about how you're going to get to that next step. Digital transformation is a great terminology to use, right? It enables a new way of thinking for your organization. It's moving beyond just extracting data, throwing it in a spreadsheet, spending 3 weeks to 10 days trying to get the answers you want, realizing it's not in real time and you're still not doing work digitally because none of the information is in the system and I have to upload it back. It is a significant change. It's a new way of life, a new way of thinking. Of all the ways that you look at in the consumer world right now, take that and say, how can my business be better? Because we do things better in the consumer world, right? It relies on technology. It's all about automating everything, much more than we even can think about in this point in time. But at some point in time, a lot of the own thinking that we do will be embedded in some of these technologies. Is it going to change us as human beings? In some ways, it may make us lazier, but in other ways, it's going to give us a lot more information faster and allow us to make decisions faster. And that's what our businesses are counting on, getting to those actionable insights and changing the business for the better. It does build a digital business pipe. It helps the organization have a complete digital view that's embedded across the enterprise. And I have to be honest with you, it's becoming a requirement for businesses to survive. I showed you the revenue and profit of those that were digitally determined versus those that were digitally distraught earlier. And more, we're seeing organizations, if they just sit around and do nothing and, oh, we've got the assets already, we don't need to do it, we survive, we've got what we need, they're not going to be here. So the decision is yours. Will you survive or will you thrive? Something to think about as you go forward. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Anissa. Anissa?
Thanks, Mickey. So in the next part of the webinar, I'm going to be talking a bit about what we here at Celonis have been seeing in the market and among our customers with regard to system migrations. And I'm also going to address a few of the key areas that we tend to help with when it comes to these big migration projects. But before we dive into that, I wanted to introduce sort of a broader concept that's going to be important later on. And this is also our mission here at Celonis. Hold on a second. And that is that, we believe that processes should be extraordinary experiences for everyone. And what we mean by that is that in our daily lives, whether it's our professional lives or our personal lives, there are some experiences that are seamless and delightful and frictionless, or as we like to say, superfluid, and some that aren't. So to kind of illustrate this with a little example, think about trying to become a customer of Slack versus purchasing some on-premise servers. It takes about 10 clicks to become a Slack customer. You get really instant access to their product, whereas with our hardware example, you have to jump through some hoops, talk to salespeople, wait for deliveries. There's much more friction in terms of getting actually what you want. And you might argue that what makes Slack super fluid is that it's software and it has this beautiful UI that's easy to learn. It's really intuitive. But what we would argue is that part of what makes any experience with a business super fluid are the processes that are kind of powering those experiences at the company. So without a really tight order to access process, you wouldn't be able to become a customer of Slack in 10 clicks, no matter how their app was designed or their website was designed. So thinking about this framework of super fluid versus full of friction, where do you think a system migration process falls? And I think a lot of us who have led system migrations or been part of major system migrations would probably agree they tend to be a bit more on the frictionful side. And in fact, Gartner estimates that about 60% of migrations are perceived as having failed because they compromise the business in some way. So they don't really support what the users or business processes actually need. And even if you're able to design something that's a really good on-paper fit, a lot of times adoption can still be a huge challenge and really affect your time to value. And what this is all kind of culminating in is rising implementation costs. So it's costing more and more to actually perform these migrations. And in fact, implementation labor rates are projected to increase by 60% in the next 18 months. So the themes that we're really seeing across our customers are, three major concerns. The first is around project costs and scope. People are really concerned that they're going to kick off a migration and then the scope and the costs are going to balloon out of control and they're not going to be able to, close it down and finish it in good time. They're also really concerned about solution fit, so making sure that what they roll out to their business users is actually a really great fit, not only for their expectations, but also for the processes that they actually need to facilitate. And the last is user adoption. This is obviously a huge concern in any technology project, but particularly in migrations, you need to make sure that your users are actually not only adopting the new tools, but also the actual processes that those tools are put in place to facilitate. Because you might plan for your migration to be frictionless, to be something like this, nice and linear, very straightforward, but inevitably friction creeps in and issues come up. And these friction points, whether they be unexpected lack of standardization across your teams, maybe extra iteration on your process models, or just users who are slow to adopt new ways to work, these can actually delay or even prevent you from achieving that value that you set out to achieve when you invested in your new or upgraded solution. And this is actually something that Celonis has been helping customers with quite a bit over the last few years. So broadly, we actually help IT leaders discover the root causes of these friction points, resolve these issues proactively before they become delays, and then monitor those critical migration KPIs to keep those projects running smoothly. Because what we've actually found is that a lot of those friction points are caused by legacy methods used in most migrations. So things like workshops, surveys, time studies, interviews, and these are important tools in any migration toolkit, and they shouldn't be done away with completely, but they can be problematic when they're used in isolation because they tend to be pretty subjective. You're relying on people's opinions, memory, the politics of your organization, and they're pretty time consuming and costly. So whether you're flying people around the world to attend and facilitate workshops, whether you've outsourced this to a consultant and you're spending millions of dollars a year to have a consultant run these processes, or just taking a lot of time out of your subject matter expert's day, having them spend weeks and weeks in workshops, validating solutions, mapping processes. And then at the end of it, you really only have this very fleeting understanding of what's going on. So essentially what we're helping companies do at Celonis is do all of this in a more objective and effective way. So we actually give you access to data coming directly from your IT systems. You can get a 100% objective picture of how your processes actually run. And in addition, once you're implemented, it's really easy to answer new questions about your processes, map new variants. And since this data is coming from a live connection, from your IT systems, it's always reflecting the most accurate information, and you can continually optimize and make sure you're getting that most up-to-date picture. So because of all of these, we're able to address those major friction points and concerns that I mentioned earlier. The first obviously being project costs. Now, obviously, there are a lot of reasons why your project scope and costs can increase. They can be mismanaged in many different ways, but one of the most common ones that we see is an extension of this business process mapping phase. This is usually the first phase in any migration. You send out a bunch of people to go document all the relevant processes in your organization before you start. And this can last a year, maybe more, depending on how large and complex your organization is. A lot of times it's outsourced to consultants, so millions of dollars to spend. And it's also a very costly use of your subject matter experts' time, weeks and weeks spent in workshops, not actually getting to their day jobs. But with Celonis, you can actually reduce that process mapping phase significantly. And you're actually able to mine the process documentation directly from user data and export those models as BPMN. So not only is this much faster and more reliable, but it also enables you to ensure that your documentation covers a really specific area of your process. So for example, whether you want to document every single permutation that's ever occurred in your process, or whether you're looking to capture best practices or the most common variants. So to give you an idea of how this works, here we see a process explorer in Celonis. So here you see a purchase to pay process displayed, and you can actually assess the different permutations of this process based on throughput time, volume, value, and then with a few clicks, export these variants as BPMN. So you can do this either for a really select group of variants. So here we have the top 5. Or for every variant in your process. So I think this is 655 different permutations of this purchase to pay process. So this completely automates that process mapping phase and makes it 100% based on the actual historical data of how your processes run through your operational systems. So the second area that we tend to help with is ensuring that your solution actually fits user needs. So typically, you would design a new process map based on those documentations that we mentioned before, which, as we just discussed, can sometimes be incomplete or subjective in some ways. And then you'd run a series of fit gap workshops to validate that solution and make changes and iterate. But obviously, since those are both sort of prone to some human error, some issues aren't discovered until go live, until you're quite far down the road and you realize that, some processes aren't properly supported or some user flows aren't supported either. So with Celonis, you can actually measure quantitatively how well your proposed solution actually fits with user data. And you can make adjustments and assess the impact of those tweaks immediately on your fit. So to illustrate this, here in Celonis, we see a conformance checker. So this actually assesses the exact percentage of times when your process conforms to a particular model. So in this example, it's 56% of cases are conforming. And Celonis will actually generate a ranked list of violations, which are kind of activities that cause some cases not to conform. So this is kind of an automatically generated list of deltas that you need to address in some way. And you can also really quickly whitelist any of those violations and immediately see the impact on conformance of including one of those in your model. So, obviously this will save you a lot of time. You won't have to run workshops and upon workshops every time you make a small change. And it also helps you be more data-driven in the way you're designing new processes. So finally, one of the other areas that we help a lot with is supporting users during go live and hypercare, making sure you actually get that value. So typically, you would give users some training, maybe in the classroom, maybe online, and then they're kind of left to adopt, left to do their business, and then maybe you're tracking adoption in terms of active users or the volume of some document or object running through the system. And then if the business value isn't achieved by a certain date, it's a bit hard to know why, especially if we're talking about major migrations like ERP, where people can't just stop logging in altogether. There's a lot more nuance to what adoption really means. So with Celonis, you can actually decrease the time to value by ensuring that adoption. So you can not only discover those barriers to adoption for users, but actually implement intelligent alerts that helps correct that user behavior early on. You can also monitor adoption in terms of process adoption, so understanding how people are actually using the system in terms of the processes that you want them to use versus deviations from those processes. And then, as always, you can continually monitor and optimize as you go forward in your journey. So to help you understand how this might look, here we have the action engine in Celonis. So basically, this gives your users an inbox of intelligent tasks that are automatically triggered by insights generated from Celonis, which is constantly monitoring and analyzing your processes. So these tasks actually give them all the context they need to take the correct action in their system. So whether that's a shortcut directly to the operational system, or deploying some kind of automation, or taking an action outside the system, like sending an auto-populated email. So to give a really quick procurement example, some of our customers will measure maverick buying as a measure of adoption of a procurement process. So maverick buying is when someone in the business is buying things outside of the contracts and approvals set up by procurement. So it's a good measure of how well your procurement process is actually being adopted. So one thing that some customers might do is set up a signal in the action engine that fires every time the maverick buying ratio for a certain segment of the organization gets to a certain threshold. So in this case, we have 35%, and it's for a specific company code. And in this case, this would go to management, and then they could take some action, whether sending an auto-populated reinforcement email, maybe just diving into the analysis to look into root causes or get more information, or maybe there's a problem with training and people in this particular group need better training. So ultimately what this helps you do is actually get more value from the solution that you've invested in. So whether that's reducing the cost to implement it, optimizing how you actually spend that implementation budget. So not wasting that money on things that can be automated, like process documentation. It also helps you reduce those long-term costs. So if you can get the solution fit right the first time, you'll save yourself a lot of trouble down the road. And then obviously you can't really get ROI from a solution without having your users adopt. So ensuring that you get that adoption early on. Now I know I've shared a few screenshots and alluded to how our product works, but just to give you a little background in case you're curious, essentially we have a whole bunch of connectors to common operational systems, so SAP, Oracle, Salesforce, and our platform is built on process mining technology. So this ingests data from those operational systems and reconstructs them in a process flow. This enables you to actually discover issues within your processes, proactively avoid those delays and issues, and then monitor the results of those actions that you've taken. And then on top of this platform, we've built a bunch of purpose-built accelerators. So these are like apps that help you optimize the day-to-day performance of a very specific segment of your enterprise. So one quick example would be, we have one that helps finance optimize working capital by optimizing the schedule in which they pay invoices. But this is also obviously very related to system migration. So one example is one of our customers, Schlumberger, which is a major oil and gas company here in the US. They recently launched one of the largest SAP migrations on record, and Celonis was a big part of how they ensured that was a successful rollout. So a few of the ways they leveraged our platform during this migration: first, embarking on some process improvement and simplification prior to the migration to make sure that they had the best processes possible before they even started. They also leverage some of those conformance checking and user adoption monitoring use cases that I alluded to earlier to make sure that hypercare was as short and effective as possible. And then obviously as they are in their post-deployment phase, they're continuously monitoring and improving processes to make sure that the solution is stable for the business and they're delivering on those promised advantages of their new system. But it's also important to mention that we help with more than just migrations. We're actually working with some of the largest and most complex organizations in the world to discover, enhance, and monitor really any type of business process. So whether that's POs or customer support tickets, or if you're Lufthansa airplane ground operations or automotive production. And so we're really helping customers across industries and across functions really get those super fluid processes across their businesses. So before we open it up for questions, I know I've had to gloss over a lot of details for the sake of time. So if anything I have said has piqued your interest and you'd love to hear more or have your questions answered more specifically, please visit celonis.com/contact, and we'd love to speak with you. And now we will be taking some questions. Okay. So I think this one is for Mickey. Mickey, you're still on the line?
I am. Can you hear me, I hope?
Yeah. So what is the biggest piece of advice you would have for an IT leader who is looking to make the case for a major migration to the C-suite?
Don't think you have to, one, do it on your own, or you have to rely completely on your consultants or partners to help you. You need to be looking for a way to do this from a very efficient, automated, even AI perspective. Use innovation and help yourself become digital faster. Don't make it hard on yourselves.
Great. Okay. So if someone is looking to move to that sort of digitally embedded organizational structure, how would you recommend they go about that? What types of digital talent should be embedded?
You can't just rely on the current talent that you have. You have to step back and you have to recognize that you will need some new individuals in the organization that can bring a more scientific and automated aspect of learning and change management to the organization. Individuals who can question why something needs to be done and look at it from a different context to say, what if we did this differently, and what if we did this, and challenges the status quo. So it's really about understanding where you're at and knowing that in order for you to change, you have to have that change management perspective. So you need the right individuals that are focused on that. You also need the right technology and those individuals who can help you understand what types of technology are out there as well.
Great. Okay, so we have a question that says, can you describe the robot integration in the Action Engine? Yeah, so we partner with a bunch of the leading RPA vendors like UiPath, Automation Anywhere. So you can actually connect your RPA bots to the Action Engine and have the actions actually trigger bots instead of people. So that's what that is about. And maybe we'll take one more question. How many more do we have? Okay, yeah. So this one is also for Mickey. So what KPIs would you recommend that IT track as they attempt to move kind of towards that more digitally determined state?
It's really about where are you now and putting the stake in the ground to baseline where you are. And as you start to move forward, start thinking about what things will change as you become more digital, right? If I think of hyperspeed, right? Hyperscale, right? And hyper complexity and making it simple. How do you get to those next level and scale and make your organization more agile? Yes, it's about efficiency. Yes, it's about productivity, but not in an old-fashioned term. It's not taking A plus B equals C. It's A plus B, C, D, E, and F equals Z. It's really about taking different variables, putting them together, and looking at the next set that gets you to a higher level. So as I said in the webinar, we looked at innovation rate and how you can bring 8% better engaging product and service innovation to your client base. You can also look at customer advocacy, I never can say that, customer advocacy scores, which are digitally determined to have 23% more likely to ensure a positive customer experience. So what does it mean from your customer aspect? Also looking at data capitalization, right? What is your return on data-related investments? Those that are digitally determined have 19% better at monetizing data and business returns. They understand that data that they get from everything they do in a digital experience can actually be reused and monetized and sold externally. And also looking at your digital operation, right? 34% of the digitally determined are more focused than digitally distraught on creating a sustainable digital process. So it's moving away from the traditional measurements and bringing your organization into that next level.
Great, thanks. Okay, so we've actually gotten a few more questions, so we're going to take these. So the next one we have is, how does Celonis provide data for insights and analytics to analyze processes? So as I mentioned, we have these pre-built connectors to operational systems. So typically you're just connecting to your SAP system, your Salesforce system, whatever it might be, and that's being automatically ingested into our system and analyzed. Okay, we have, is there a way for us to test out Celonis before engaging further? And yes, actually, we have a kind of free version of our software called Celonis Snaps. If you go to our website, you can log in and you can connect data from ServiceNow automatically, or you can upload data in a few different ways. There are instructions on the website. Oh, okay, so I think this one is for Mickey. So in M&A, are there any specific tools for evaluating and tracking value realization in disintegrated system architecture across the combined organization?
That's a good question. I know that there are. Do I cover them specifically? No. You heard some ideas here today, but I do think there's a lot out there. If you think about it, every technology has data sets to it, and so if you're going to feed from an M&A perspective a lot of data into a system, it's going to come back and give you some analysis based on what it knows of that particular acquisition and maybe some predefined characteristics that you would tie into about your company. So while I don't know all the names other than what you've seen some of the stuff here today, I am sure there's a whole slew of them, and if there aren't, I'm sure they'll be coming forward right now.
Great. Okay, so the next question we have is, okay, can Celonis be used for selection systems rather than just for migrations? So can it help define the as-is state? There's not a single system to interrogate. So I believe I understand what you're asking, and so typically when we implement, we can kind of stitch together multiple systems to kind of represent that as-is process. This is obviously yeah, on a case-by-case basis, exactly how this works in your organization. But I believe the answer to your question is yes. Okay, so I think that's all the questions we have. Yeah, if you have more questions or you want to get in touch, again, celonis.com/contact. We'd be happy to get in touch. Also, the session has been recorded, so you will get a link to download the recording if you want to review it or send it to your colleagues. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, Mickey, for presenting today.